Hello and welcome to the 17th lesson of this Excel course. I am Sumit Bansal and in this video we will learn about named ranges in Excel. Let's get started by understanding what is a named range and how to create one. A named range is a single cell or a set of cells to which we have given a name, and then going forward we can use that name in formulas or in conditional formatting or anywhere else to refer to that range of cells or that single cell. So here I have a simple example. I have revenue and cost of goods sold, and if I have to calculate gross profit margin, then it would be C2 minus C3, and if I hit enter, this gives me the result of gross profit margin. Now this is a very small example, only 3 data points, but if you have a huge data set and if you are working with these, so this reference C2 minus C3 may not mean a lot to you because there could be many such references. So in this case it is a good idea to name these cells. So let me show you the easiest way to give a cell a name. In this case, if I go to C2 and I select C2 and I go to this box on the left of formula bar, which is the name box, I can type a name. In this case I would type revenue, which is very descriptive, and I would know that a revenue name range would refer to cell C2 which contains revenue. And now I hit enter. It is very important to hit enter. If you go and click on any of the other cells, then the name would not be created. So as soon as I hit enter, now the name has been created, and if you go and see here, it's a drop down, you would see that this name is here. If I click on some other cell, go on this drop down and select revenue, it would come back and select this cell. Similarly, I go to cell C3 and I type the name COGS, which refers to cost of goods sold, and I hit enter. Now these two names have been created. Now when I go to this cell, instead of having this formula C2 minus C3, I can simply type revenue, and as I type, Excel prompts the name of these cells. So here I have one of the named ranges which matches these alphabets, REVE, which is revenue, and you can see there is this icon here. So this is a named range icon, and I can use this name directly. I could hit tab or I could select it by double clicking on it, and I would subtract cost of goods sold. So I would type C. As soon as I type C, you can see here I have the name range. I would type O, and here I have this. I can simply continue to type, or I can just select it by using the arrow key and hit tab. And now when I hit enter, it gives me the same result. But if you use this, if you select this cell, and if you go to the formula bar, you would see that this is a lot more descriptive than the earlier version which said C2 minus C3. So if you're working with a lot of data, or if you're working with data where you may not want to go back again and again to these cells and refer to these cell addresses, you can use name ranges. And name range is a very efficient way to work with formulas. Now there are some rules that you need to follow while you are creating a named range. If you are naming here, so for example here we gave the name revenue, but say for example these are the values for revenue 2013, and you want to type this name, you cannot type a name which has a space in between. So you would have to use something like revenue underscore 2013 or revenue 2013 without any space. If there are spaces, then those names are not created. Another rule is that you cannot create a named range that refers to a cell address. So for example here, if you want to create a named range with 100 and you type that, it would go and select the cells because there are already inbuilt cell address here which you can use. So you would not be able to use something like for example, let me go to the extreme right and let's see if I can come up with something. So maybe I say I want to create a name range CAM10. Maybe I'm working with a camera company and I want to create something like this. I would not be able to do this because CAM10 already exists as a cell reference. So you cannot create anything that already exists as a cell reference. You cannot create a named range which has a space in between. You can use a couple of symbols such as underscore or dot or backslash, but you cannot use other characters. You cannot use at the rate, or you cannot use other symbols here. Another rule in creating named ranges is that you cannot create a named range that starts with a number. So for example here, if I want to type 2013 revenue, then I'll not be able to create it. If I hit enter, you can see this gives me an error. So these are the rules that you need to be cautious of while you are creating a named range. We have seen one of the ways of creating named ranges, which is using the name box, but there are other ways as well that you can use. For example, if I go to formulas, here I have define names group, and within this I have this option define name. If I click on it, it opens the new name dialog box. Here I can create a new name range by typing the names. Let me say I'm creating a name range called interest underscore rate. I can specify the scope, which means that if I select workbook, this named range would be available in all the worksheets in this workbook. But if I only select sheet 1, this named range would only be available in sheet 1 and would not work in other sheets. I can type some comment as to where I want to use this named range or a little more description about it, and I can use refers to field to say what value or cell reference this named range should refer to. If I click OK as of now, it would refer to sheet 1A1, which is this cell. But if I type a value here, so for example if I type 12%, then this named range interest underscore rate would refer to the static value 12%. I can also use a formula here, and we will see later in this video how to use a formula to create a named range. Now when I click OK, I have a name range created, which is interest underscore rate. So now say I have this value 1000 here, and I want to calculate what would be my interest rate next year. Then I can simply use this cell reference, multiply this by interest underscore rate. As I type, you can see it prompts the name of that name range. I hit tab and I hit enter, and as soon as I do this, you can see I have 120 here. So one of the benefits of having these named ranges is that if you have a huge data set and if you're using this value again and again in your formulas, then instead of using the cell reference C2 or C3 or whatever, you can use this name interest underscore rate. And it is also easy for us to track this in formulas, so that if you read this, you would instantly know that I'm calculating the interest rate for next year by using this value 1000. So this is how you can create name range. Third way of creating name range is using this option create from selection. Again, in formulas define names group, you have this option create from selection. Now let me show you how it works. So I would type quarters, and I have these values Q1, Q2, Q3 and Q4. The idea is to create a name range called quarters that would refer to these 4 cells. So to do that, I would select this entire data set. I would go to formulas, create from selection, and this opens the create names from selection dialog box. Here I have 4 options: create names from values in the top row, left column, bottom right or right column. If I only select top row, this would create a name range called quarters, and it would refer to these 4 cells Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Let me show you. If I click OK and I go to this name box, you can see I have a name range called quarters. When I click on it, it selects these 4 cells. But say you have a bigger data set. So here I have something called as sales, or maybe just type here the region US, Canada, India, and I would type the names here: Joe, Martha, Harry, and maybe my name, Sumit. And let me give some random values to it. So I would use rand between formula to give values between 100 to 1000. I would hit control enter, and I would, since this is a volatile formula, it would recalculate again and again. So I would paste this as values so that these become static values. Now when I select this entire data set and I go to formulas, create from selection, I have these 2 options already checked, top row and left column, and this is exactly what I want. I want to create name ranges which are US, Canada, India, and Joe, Martha, Harry and Sumit. So Joe name range would refer to these 3 cells, US name range would refer to these cells vertically. If I click OK and I go here, you can see that all these name ranges have been created. If I select India, I have these 4 names. If I select Martha, I have this cell. Now you may think what would be the value here for these, but it is a good way if you have these named ranges available. So for example, let me show you a formula. I want to identify what are the maximum sales done by Martha. So to do that, I would simply use the max formula, and instead of giving these numbers, instead of selecting these numbers, I can simply pass on the named range. And when I hit enter, it gives me the value 696, which is the maximum sales done by Martha. Similarly, I can identify the maximum sales done in the US. I can simply give the name range US, and it selects this entire name range, and I can hit enter. So you see how easy it is if you have a name range to refer to these name ranges in formulas. I can simply just type this formula and use these names instead of cell references, because these names make a lot of sense while you're working with this data set. So this is how you can create name ranges in Excel. There are three ways. You can either use the name box, you can either use the define name dialog box, or you can create name ranges from selection. So we have seen three ways to create name ranges, but if you have a lot of name ranges, you may want to manage these, or you may want to edit one of the name ranges. To do that, you can go to the formulas tab, and here you have name manager within define names group. Click on name manager, and when you open the name manager dialog box, it would show you a list of all the name ranges that exist in your entire workbook. You can filter these name ranges by either only selecting name ranges which are scoped to worksheet or to the workbook. You can identify names with errors or without errors, or you can also have table names, because even in case of tables, name ranges are created automatically. In this case, you can manually go and select these name ranges, and if you want to edit these, click on this option. So for example, I've selected India, and if I want to edit this name range, I would click on edit, and this opens the edit name dialog box. Here I can edit the name, I can edit comments, or I can edit the refers to field, where it could be a cell reference, it could be a formula, or it could be a value. And when I'm done, I can click OK, or I can click cancel to go back. Similarly, I can edit any of these name ranges. You can also create a new name range here by clicking on the new button here, and it opens the new name dialog box. You can again create a name range or click cancel to go back. You can also edit these name ranges directly from here. So you have the refers to field, and if I click on say India, and I get access to refers to field, and here I can manually change this data, or I can maybe go and select the data and it'll change here. So this is the name manager dialog box, which you can use to manage the name ranges that you have. You can also delete name ranges. In this case, if I let me click no to come back to this. You can also delete name ranges. For example, if I want to delete the name range Canada, I can simply go here and click on delete. It would prompt me if I want to confirm this, and I say OK, and that has been deleted. If you want to delete multiple name ranges, just select these multiple name ranges by using a control key, and you can delete these multiple name ranges at one go. So this is how you can use the name manager in Excel. There are keyboard shortcuts that would come in really handy if you work with a lot of name ranges, and I call it the power of F3, because all these would involve the F3 key. So let me show you these three. The first one is F3. If you simply press this key F3, click anywhere and press F3, it would show you the paste name dialog box, and here you can see I have all these name ranges. So for example, maybe I'm creating a formula. I want to get the sum of all the sales done in India, but I do not remember what was the named range name that I created. So I would simply click on F3, and it gives me the name, all these named ranges. I would select India, click OK, and it inserts this named range in this formula for me. So this is a good way if you do not remember all these named ranges, which is really difficult if you're working with a lot of data. Then you can use F3 and paste the name. Another shortcut is Control F3. Control F3 opens the name manager dialog box, and this is really handy if you're working with a lot of name ranges. You quickly want to edit these or change these, then you can use Control F3 to open the name manager dialog box. And the third is Control Shift F3. So if I want to create name ranges from this selection, I can select it and press Control Shift F3, and this opens the create names from selection dialog box. So it would quickly create these name ranges for top row and left column. If I click OK, I already have these name ranges, so it would not be created. But if you have a new data set and you want to create it very quickly from the selection, just select it, press Control Shift F3, select the relevant option and click OK, and all these name ranges would be created. So these three shortcuts could be really helpful if you're working with a lot of name ranges. Now suppose I have this data set years from 2008 to 2013, and I want to use this by creating a named range. To do that, I would simply select this, and the quickest way would be to press Control Shift F3, open create names from selection. I would say top row. I click OK, and now when I go and select years, it select these cells. But what if I want to make it dynamic? So for example, next year it becomes 2014, but even if now I go here and select years, it select to these cells only. Again, if I use it in formula, so for example I find the maximum value of years of this named range, it would still give me 2013 despite the fact that I've added 2014 here. The reason being that the way I've created it, it is not dynamic, it is not updating itself. So in this part of the video I will show you two ways to create a name range that updates itself. So let me go back to the original value here till 2013, and I would create a formula here, and I would use this formula in named range creation. And since this formula is dynamic, that named range would again be dynamic. So I would use two formulas. First, let me show you how to do this using offset formula. So let me first create it here in this cell, and then I would put it in the named range. In offset, it takes five arguments: the reference, row number, or the number of rows, the number of columns, height and width, which means that if I give the reference as K5, it will ask me how many rows do I want to offset this, how many columns do I want to offset this. If I say one row, one column, it would come here to L6 because it would offset it by one row and one column. But I do not want any offsetting by rows and columns. I would say 0, 0. What I'm interested is in adjusting the height, because I want this to refer to this range, but if it gets incremented by one more, then it should refer to this entire range instead of only referring it till 2013. So to do that, I would have to somehow make the height portion dynamic, and to do that I would use the count if formula, and I would count the number of cells which are filled here. So I have to select a range. This formula takes two arguments, range and criteria. In range I would select a lot of cells here because I'm not sure how many cells there would be, so I've selected a lot of cells here. I press F4 to lock this, and in criteria I would say this should not be equal to, so the operator is always within double quotes, and ampersand, this should not be equal to blank. This is my criteria. So it would have the height for all those cells that are not blank. In this case there would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this part would return 6. If I select this and press F9, you can see this returns 6. I would press Ctrl Z to go back, and I would say comma, width is okay, whatever it is, so I don't even need to give the width value. Now when I press enter, this gives a value error. But if you go to the edit mode and select this entire formula and press F9, you can see this gives you an array of these values, which is 2008 to 2013. Now let's test this. Let me put in 2014 here, and now when I again go back to this formula, press F2 to get into the edit mode, select this and press F9, this adds 2014 as well, which means that now this has become dynamic. If I add 2015 here, go back to this formula, press F2, select this and press F9, you can see it adds 2015 here. Now if I use this formula, so for example let me select this formula and let me go to formulas, define name, and I would create a name range. I would say dynamic years, and I would use this formula here. I would press Ctrl V and I would click OK. Now if I use this formula, so for example let me find the maximum value of this range dynamic years and hit enter, this gives me 2015. Similarly, if you are creating a drop down list, and this is something that we would discuss later in our video course, but if you're creating a drop down data validation list, you can go to data validation, and here let me clear this cell, and here I would insert data validation. I would click on data validation, I would select list, and I would paste the name of the name range that I've created. I would press F3 and I would use dynamic years. I would click OK, and when I click OK, it has created this drop down for me with these years in it. Let me check it again. I think there is some issue with the name range. Right, so if I press Ctrl F3 to open the dialog box, I go to dynamic years. The problem here is that I did not lock sheet 1, this value here. So I would make this K5 K5 and I would lock this value. Now this would work. Right. Now when you can see that this is a dynamic name range. Similarly, if I simply delete this and again go back to the drop down, you can see that it has updated. Now 2014 and 2015 are not a part of this. So offset is one of the ways you can create a dynamic name range. Another function that can do it for us is index. So let me use index formula, and I would again select a lot of cells here so that even if I add a lot more year numbers here, it would still be accounted for in this array. I would press F4 to lock this, and in case of a row number, I would have to give a row number of the last cell, and to do that I would again use COUNTIF formula with the same thing. I would use this range, press F4, and in criteria I would say not equal to ampersand empty. And since there is only one column, I need not give the column value as well. Now when I press enter, this gives me 2013, which is the last value. If I change this to 2014, this changes. Similarly, if I change this to 2015, this changes. But I do not want a value. I want this formula to refer to a range of cells. And this is the beauty of index formula. You can do that by just simply inserting a cell reference at the beginning and pressing colon key. So now I have K5 colon index. Now K5 is to this value. While this returns a value, if I hit F9, I can see this returns 2015. But when it is in front of a cell reference, it would return the cell reference of this cell. So now if I select this entire formula and hit F9, you can see that this gives me all these values from 2008 to 2015. Again, the same way offset formula was working. So now I would use this formula in my name manager. I would hit Control F3, and here in dynamic years I would change this formula to the index formula, and I would press F4 to lock K5. It asks me if I'm sure I want to change this, and I say yes. Now again, if I go to the drop down, you can see that it refers to the index formula and it has all these name ranges till 2015. If I add more to it, if I make 2016 and 2017, maybe I'm working with forecasted data, you can see that this gets extended. So these are two formulas that you can use to create dynamic name ranges in Excel. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you and have a nice day.